Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Cordially welcome to our lecture introduction today, which takes place within the framework of Peaceline. Peaceline is a project carried out by the Volksbund, the German War Graves Commission, financed and supported by the German Federal Foreign Office. And Peaceline brings young people together to remembrance journeys through Europe, the so-called peace lines. For 14 days, the peaceliners visit places in Europe that commemorate the First and Second World Wars, the unification of Europe, and the idea is to exchange national narratives and, above all, to get to know the national narratives of the others. Today, I welcome 20 peaceliners here in Karlshorst from 10 countries, and I do hope that very many follow at the screen as well. My name is Heike Dörrenbecher. I'm head of Department for Culture of Remembrance and Education at the German War Graves Commission. Dear peaceliners, today we would have loved to be in St. Petersburg and to commemorate there the beginning of the blockade of Leningrad, the 8th of September 1941. We wanted to go to the Piskaryov Cemetery, the central memorial site of the blockade victims. This is not possible due to pandemic situation and entry restriction into Russia, but the topic is very important to European remembrance, and that is why we dedicated a whole session, a whole discussion here in Berlin to the Leningrad Blockade. We are very grateful to the director of the German-Russian Museum, Dr. Jörg Morré, to host us here today. Dr. Morré studied history, Russian studies and education in Berlin and Hamburg. He got his doctoral degree at the Ruhr University Bochum. And for 12 years, from 1996 to 2008, he worked as research assistant in memorial sites in Germany. Since 2009, he is director of the German-Russian Museum Karlshorst. Dr. Morré is also a member of the German-Russian Historical Commission, and we are very proud of that. He's also a member of our scientific advisory board of the German War Graves Commission, to just name two more functions he has got. The German-Russian Museum has already organized twice an exhibition on the blockade of Leningrad. And the last one was in 2011, and there was also a publication which was done with my former colleagues, the German Association for Eastern European Studies. And those who read German, I very much recommend this journal. It's Osteuropa, and it's a special edition on the Leningrad blockade, like 400 pages, very, very interesting to read. And you were one of the authors and people who have initiated that. So maybe some technical hints briefly about the schedule and how we are going to proceed. Dr. Morré will give an introduction of about 10 minutes about the historical facts of the Leningrad blockade. Afterwards, we would like to get into a conversation with you, with the audience in the room. And you could ask questions directly because the microphone will be passed on by Vincent Kratzer. And to our audience at the screen, we would be most interested to have your questions as well. And you can ask your questions or give your comments via the chat function, and my colleague Viola Benz will hand it in to us. So, Dr. Morré, it would be really very nice if you could introduce us, maybe first of all, to the historical site we are in, and then we are looking forward to your introduction to the Leningrad Blockade. And thank you very much again for having us here.
Thank you. Welcome all here in the German-Russian Museum. Welcome all here in this room where the Second World War in Europe came to an end. Yeah, this is the original room, you can say, more or less. In this room, in the night from 8th to 9th of May 45, all the soldiers, all the generals came together. This was at that time the headquarters of the Red Army. Marshal Zhukov was the chief, and the headquarters from the Western Allied, General Eisenhower, not by itself, it was his deputy, Marshal Tedder, came here to Karlshorst because a day before the Wehrmacht surrendered already in France and Reims. So this is really the place where the last point were made to finish World War II. I already told you this military act of surrender was so important in his historical sense because afterwards there were no treaty of peace. So this is the only document, this surrender, this act of surrender, it's 1.5 pages, but this is the only document which shows or which make clear that the war is over. So this is why this place is so important. Another perspective is, of course, for the Allied troops, first of all the Red Army, but for the American, British, and a bit France soldiers as well, it was the place of their victory. So this is the reason why we became a museum. About 50 years ago, 67, this house became a museum. At that time, a Soviet military museum, and nowadays, for already 25 years, a bit more, we are a German-Russian museum. And this is it's so welcome for me that Germans and Russians are working together, and not only German and Russians. We have colleagues from Kiev and Minsk, from Ukraine and Belarus as well in our board, in our association which runs this museum. So that means, in a very technical sense, once a year, everyone who's member in our association come here to Berlin, to Karlshorst, sometimes to this room as well, just to discuss all the stuff, how the museum is going, how I'm acting as a director, and what we are going to do. And of course, we are focusing on the huge data, on the huge moments in history, and in this year it's 80 years already ago. It's the 80th anniversary of the war against the German attack on the Soviet Union. And in consequence of this attack, the blockade of Leningrad took place. So very brief in a military sense, the main attack, the main strike started in June 41, on 22nd of June, summer. Yes, you can say in the middle, in Poland, Belarus. So where the town Brest nowadays is, there was a frontier between Soviet Union and the German Reich, Germany. There was no Polish state at that time. That's why there was a close, a direct frontier. So the Wehrmacht attacked, and the Red Army was not prepared. So this is the one point. The military intelligence, Soviet military intelligence, knew about that, but Stalin didn't believe. And in the thinking of the Red Army of the Soviet Union, they were not prepared. So for the Red Army, for the soldiers in the first line, it was a shock. So the first weeks in June, July 41, in the western part of the Soviet Union, European part, where there are the towns Lviv, Lemberg, Lvov, and Ukrainian nowadays, Brest, Minsk, or the Baltic towns, they were shocked. And the Wehrmacht appeared very, very, very fast. So after a week, 8 days, they were in Minsk, and so on. The Baltic states were kept in end of June, beginning of July. And the blockade of Leningrad started, 8th of September, 2 months after beginning, you can say, this attack, 3. And but the main strike was made in the middle, going to Moscow. So the Wehrmacht tried to get to Moscow. They didn't make it. At the end, there was this was already in December 41, defense of Moscow, and the Red Army really defended Moscow. So the Wehrmacht didn't come to Moscow. But this was the main aim, the main strike. And keep in mind that the Wehrmacht, the Germans thought this will be a so-called Blitzkrieg, a very brief attack, and the German victory after a few weeks. they estimated maybe 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks, 2 months more or less. Because they thought Red Army is not fit enough, is very weak, they are not prepared, and we are, the Wehrmacht, the Germans, we are the best soldiers of the world. That was a kind of overestimating, but there was a real background, you can say. The Wehrmacht, for the last 2 years, at that time, summer 41, Germany occupied the whole western part of Europe. So there was no really counterpart of the Wehrmacht. And so, blockade of Leningrad, this was, how can I say, the main strike was made in the middle, and in the south they came at that time, or till end of 41, up to Kharkov, the end of eastern Ukraine, you can, how to imagine on the map. And in the north, the aim was, of course, Leningrad. This was one of the hugest towns in the Soviet Union. In, how can I say, in an emotional sense, it was the town of the revolution, October Revolution, the main place where Lenin started his revolution. So it was very symbolic to defend Leningrad or to occupy Leningrad. And the Red Army tried to defend the town, that's for sure. So when we are talking about victims, there are already many thousands, 100,000s of victims, killed soldiers. So the Red Army all the time tried to defend Leningrad. The town was not prepared. Of course, they saw the action, Wehrmacht coming closer and closer and very fast, closer and closer, but there was no, how can I say, it was not in the thinking to do some evacuation of the inhabitants of the town. So they thought, okay, we can defend our town. They build up all the stuff you need to defend a town. And so there were some tough fights around Leningrad, beginning of September, hard attacks by artillery, bombing, by planes and on the ground. And these were the first victims, about maybe 20,000 people in the end at all, killed by bombing, by attacks on the ground. And this was the first shock for the inhabitants of the town, this bombing, not the hunger. Maybe you heard about it, because at the end, in historical sense, it's, the blockade is thinking together with the hunger in the town. At the end, we are already talking about the figures, about 1 million of people died by hunger. The town was closed, and the beginning of this blockade is the 8th of September, 41, up to January, 27th of January, 45. It's about 900 days, or 28 months. 2 years and a bit. Hard years. So, in the town there were about 2.5 inhabitants at that time, and the blockade was total for 2 months up to mid-November 41. There was no connection between the own army, between outside the Soviet homeland. So they were like an island closed down, and all the food they had, the administration of the town had some food, was running short, very fast. They were not prepared, they were not thinking about the future, they were not thinking about the winter. So, and this is the first winter in Leningrad was, once again, not prepared. So, hunger everywhere. There were no food. Then in the winter, November, December 41, there was close to Leningrad is a huge lake, Lake Ladoga. It was frozen, so over the ice there was a connection, a street, cars, lorries could drive over the frozen lake and the street of life, so called. So there was, but it was very little help. It was not enough. 2.5 million people in the town and nothing to eat. This permanent attacks, bombing, and this is a kind of terror. So this is a panic moment, you can say. And in the result, after the first winter, there are huge numbers of dead people. Every month, about 90,000, 100,000 dead in February, March, April, June 42. So the first spring, which comes in Leningrad in May, not in April, in May, it's spring. It's a kind of help. It became a bit better, but keep in mind it's 42, and I said already the blockade is going on to January 44. Another year they were locked down. There was this street of life, so-called, so a connection to the Soviet territories. But they had to go on for another year. And only in January 43, the Red Army had luck to, or they made it to establish on the ground, not over the lake, on the territory, a connection, a street between the Soviet territories and Leningrad. This is January 43, and once in another year it took to liberate this town. So, very brief. All the scenes in the town you can't describe it, and this is still a shock for the town nowadays. The historical question is, why did the Wehrmacht as they did? Why didn't they occupy the country, run over the country, and make it clear that this is the German territory and that's it? This is already a part of this planning, of the German plans to this war. The war was planned as a war of annihilation. The Wehrmacht knew that this is not only a military victory about another country. The German politics, will destroy this country, will take all the stuff they need, which is needed, food, oil, all the resources, whatever, and don't care about the inhabitants. So, in this thinking, it was pretty easy for the Wehrmacht to say, okay, we don't care about the inhabitants of this huge town. We're just waiting around. And after a few months, keeping in mind that in a few months, the victory will be on the German side. So this is another point. Keep in mind, the expectation was we do it as a blitzkrieg. After 2 or 3 months, we are the winners, which didn't fit. But when they started this blockade, they believed in a German victory. So they waited. And that's in result, they waited for these 900 days, because fighting or to take Moscow, they didn't fit. They didn't realize it, and the war goes on not as a blitzkrieg, as a normal war, you can say. In spring '42, there was a second attack. At the end, it's the Battle of Stalingrad, which took place end '42, beginning '43. And Stalingrad, this is already January, February '43, is a kind of turning point. So '43 in Leningrad is already one long year in the blockade, 1.5 years nearly, and is the first moment when there is a connection to the Soviet countries. So first hole in the blockade, '43. So, and if you are thinking in this both places, the war changes its character, but the Wehrmacht kept on. And this is, how some researchers try to explain why. This is a kind of fanatism, I would say, because the planning was made like, okay, we have to bring down this town, not caring about or thinking about the civilians, and at the end it will be ours. And this belief in German we say Endsieg, so the final victory, you can say. This belief was so strong in the German thinking of the Wehrmacht, not only the Wehrmacht, in the German brains. This is another topic, but this is one of the explanations why the Wehrmacht kept on there in Leningrad. So for nearly 3 years, the front around Leningrad stands still. And then already in January 1944, the Red Army wiped the Wehrmacht to the west. And this is already the liberation of the Soviet territories. In the Baltics, it's a bit tricky to speak about Soviet territories, but this is another topic. You go to Riga, don't you? So ask in Riga what they think about liberation of Soviet territories in 1944. This is why there are these 900 days of the blockade of Leningrad. And last point is, in the Soviet perspective, it was the defense of Leningrad. So there was not a choice for the town and for the inhabitants. They had to defend itself. But the propaganda and the thinking, and Stalin and the Kremlin said, it's the defense of Leningrad, and that's why it became so important in the Soviet remembering as well.
Thank you very much for this very interesting introduction. And I'm now talking that you can make up your mind for your questions. And maybe I start with one short question, and then please already think what you are interested in. Let's come back maybe for 1 second to the numbers, because you mentioned at the very beginning that about 600,000 up to 1 million. So we had 3 million inhabitants of Leningrad, and up to 1 to 2 million. So how many were there exactly? Is there any exact figure, or is there a problem with the figures? Maybe you can tell us about the figures, exact figures, if there are any. And the second, you said that militarily, did it make any sense? Because we were talking about waiting that they will give in, but was there any military aim with Leningrad? Because this was strategically not that important, or was it? So if you could maybe start with these 2 points, and then please already make up your questions, and Vincent is coming. Yeah?
In military sense, there was quite a sense, because there was a more or less huge harbor in the Baltic Seas, and the connection up to the north, Murmansk, and which Murmansk became very important for the Land-Lease, or the other way, for helping the Soviet Union by bringing weapons and whatever stuff by ship to the Soviet Union via Murmansk. So there was quite of sense, and the figures, it's always a problem. As I already said, for the town and for the Soviet administration, the German attack was a shock, and they were not prepared. So it was a kind of prestige to confess, or a question of prestige to confess, okay, we were not prepared and we were not able to help our people. So if you talk honestly about the losses, and nowadays we say it's 1 million more. Some researchers say 1.1 million, about 1 million more, maybe a bit more civilians.
So this means 1/3 of the population, right?
Yes, and this is of course it's a shock. Stalin, after the war, there was a trial in Nuremberg, 1946. He said, 639, 600,000 more or less. And then after it's about in the 70s. There were the figure 800,000, a bit more. And now, when you're going to St. Petersburg, to Leningrad, they talk about 1 million minimum civilians, another 1 million more or less soldiers defending the country, the town. Yeah, I think it's Stalin made the first step by not confess the whole truth, you can say, because it's a question of prestige.
Mm-hmm. So, do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, yeah, and could you please introduce yourself and tell from what country you are coming? Would be nice.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm from the United Kingdom. And my question was, given the element of prestige and trying to maintain the Soviet reputation, how is this event dealt with in Russian collective memory? And has that changed over the last century?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's changing every year. First of all, shock for the country, for the town, and after the war, the first years after the war, in the 40s, they were openly telling all the stories. There's so many. Everyone had to told his story and diaries, letters and memories and whatever. So there are so many documents. And then this is end of the 40s. Stalin, in his last years, tried to bring it down to a closed narrative, I would say. So there's one huge victory made by the Red Army, made by Stalin himself as the huge leader, and there's no place for individuals, no place for a special story of one town. This is one point. The next is it's a bit the struggle between Leningrad and Moscow. The capital is Moscow. Moscow was defended by the Red Army, and they did it. So this is a success. Leningrad is not, in military sense, not really a success. And then they tried to just to turn it into a heroic defense. So this is the best you could make if you are not able to defend your country and bringing back the Wehrmacht as they did around Moscow. It's better to say, okay, was a hard situation, but we did it. We defended, and this is the heroic defense of Leningrad. And the next step is the 80s, Gorbachev, Perestroika area. So when all these memories popped up, so this is already a change in the society, in the Soviet society. And then end of Soviet Union, end of 91. This is the next 20 years. It's how can I say? It's popping up all. So it's more or less no rules, no state, no strong leader. And nowadays there is a strong leader in Russian Federation, but how can I say the thinking of the town of St. Petersburg is very strong. So they are very by their own. So we are the Petersburgers. Forget about the Moscows people. So, and this is still possible to get in an exchange. Many people are traveling, emigrated, or just for a few years living in another country. There are so many tourists in the town, and there's huge interest in the story of the blockade. So everyone in St. Petersburg tells his story, and it's possible. And thinking in social medias and internet and so on and so on. So there's so many informations that this is still running, but it's a little bit a rollback. So 2 or 3 years ago, we had a little conference here in Karlshorst talking about the evacuation, bringing out the people of the blockaded town. and very interesting in scientific research questions. And yeah, it was very astonishing. It was very unbelievable, better to say, that the colleagues from St. Petersburg were not able to how can I say, to make a question to all topics which were shown in this conference. For example, the administration of Leningrad at that time obviously was not able or not willing to help the people leaving the town. And this is coming back, that there are some taboos, I would say. But nevertheless, that is why I first said it's changing every year. The discussion is running, and it is not in an official sphere. Everyone has the right and the possibility to become part of this discussion. So, and last point is still now, there is not one museum of the history of the blockade of St. Leningrad. So there were different attempts and so on and so on. But if you go today to St. Petersburg, yes, there is a museum of the blockade, but this is not the one and only. So obviously it's not so easy for all the inhabitants living in St. Petersburg coming together to one point.
Thank you. So, who will continue?
I'm Lewis. I'm also from the UK. I've read it was sort of when civilians were evacuating the cities, it was seen as like patriotic to leave as much stuff as possible in the home. I was wondering if this is true, and also what life was like for civilians who fled east out of the cities.
The heroic evacuation, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. How can I explain? In Soviet thinking, I would say, and this started in the late 20s. So when the Soviet Union became a huge country, or trying to become a huge country, the thinking was we're very strong and we are revolutionary. It's a new society, and we are stronger than the others. So if there's an enemy, and there are enemies, we are strong enough to defend ourselves. And Stalin brought together this patriotic thinking, this national thinking. So we as Soviet people, we are the best, you can say. So in this thinking, it's of course not so easy to say, oh, there is an enemy stronger than us. The Wehrmacht is better than the Red Army, and we are not able to defend or just bring them back, because the Red Army thought all the time, if there is an attack on the Soviet Union, maybe the enemy will fight in our country, on our territory for a week or maybe a month, but then we push them back. There was no pushing back. So they tried, it's a kind of turning the argumentation, or turn the perspective. If it is not able to push the enemy back to be stronger than the enemy, then it's patriotic to hold on, to make it patriotic, defend, and helping the inhabitants, the children, and how can I say, the strong defender there, who is the soldier of the Red Army, and Stalin, the administration, the government. Nevertheless, the government was very weak, but this is what they tried, and this is a kind of how is it in English? It's a kind of it's a switch in the switch in the argumentation.
Mm-hmm. But being a defender, is this also the reason for this taboo, the taboo of evacuation? Is this also linked to that because if you are a defender, if you are patriotic, you cannot leave. You cannot evacuate the whole population. First question, and then would it be possible to evacuate, let's say, the majority through the Ladoga Lake?
No, this was not possible. There were, keep in mind, so the whole country had to fight, not only in Leningrad. So there were no cars, no trains, no streets, no ships. So that was not possible to evacuate everyone. And Leningrad was not the only town in the western part of the Soviet Union. So everywhere was the same situation. So no way. And yeah, the defending. Defend is better than a defeat. So, this is another topic. Defending the city of Brest, or the fortress of Brest in the west, which is nowadays Belarus. There was no military sense, but they hold on. And now, and at the end, in the symbolic sense, it's so important how long they hold on. So Leningrad for 900 days, and there was no choice at the end. In Brest, you can say there was no sense, but in Leningrad there was no choice. Just giving up was not the opportunity, not the way to go, and. So they were thrown into this situation and made the best. And yeah, and this is the taboo. When the people, everyone, the normal man on the street, when he told about the life in the town, it was so unpatriotic, so unheroic. It's just suffering, and that fits not to this heroic defense.
Okay, thank you. So I have two more questions, Mrs. Savchuk and then Franka. We can even collect some questions, right?
My name is Caroline Savchuk. I work here for the museum. Maybe you can say something about the German side who would not accept a surrender from the town of Leningrad. Did I understand that right? Maybe this is interesting to know. They wouldn't have accepted a surrender.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can have another question from Franka.
I wanted to continue on this patriotic thing and this because in our groups previously we were speaking about Leningrad Blockade and these things, and so you were saying that they were holding off for so long and these things and the people and patriotic thinking, but how did they kept the morale of the people and the order in the Leningrad? So because I assume would be chaos, would be robberies, because we were speaking about this brainstorming. So the morale of the people was one point that was mentioned in the video of the museum, that they had a high morale. So was this just with patriotic thinking? Now you said was unpatriotic of the civilians. How was the morale kept for them in this starvation?
Once again, there was no choice. So the morale, there are so many stories about the cruel situations, I would say. Cannibalism, for example. This is a taboo as well. And cannibalism, that means there is no morale. There is just one against the other, and so on. Once again, no choice. If there's no choice, you're kept. It's like a prison. You can't go out. And in the town, it's always the same. Of course, there are many died in the street. That's it. Other starved for a long time and tried this and that and died at the end as well, or not. And others, they lived quite good. They had bread and food enough. And so there's a huge difference between the people who were in this prison. So kind of society in social differences, I would say. And this is unpatriotic as well. If you are a patriot, everyone is a patriot, and it's a construction of equality. Everyone is equal. Everyone is a patriot, and it doesn't play any role where you are and what you're doing and so on and so on. So, but this is already this kind of propaganda, or how can I say, of narrative. And in that time, propaganda is very, very, very important, just to keep on for the whole country. And in this sense, of course, Stalin and the governments, the Soviet government said, yes, we are defending our country, we are defending our people. And I would say, of course, you have to do so as a leader. You can't say, oh, it's all cruel and I don't know. And no, you have to be strong, of course. But afterwards in history, okay, this is my profession, but in history, it's allowed to say, okay, at that time, okay, but now we have a look into the archives and so on and so on. Yeah, and the Wehrmacht wouldn't have accepted the surrender of the Red Army of the town. Yes, that's for sure. But how can I say, there was no opportunity for the town to surrender. So they were not allowed to go to the Wehrmacht and said, okay, please come in, we're giving up. So this is already the question of ideological question. So the Nazi thinking, the German thinking of this war of annihilation, and on the other side, the Soviet Union has a strong thinking as well. So there was no way in, and thinking in terms of surrender was on both sides, not the way in which they thought. But you're right, the Wehrmacht wouldn't have accepted a surrender. This was not the plan. But on the other hand, Leningrad had no chance to surrender.
Mm-hmm. Maybe coming back to the narratives and narratives in the past and also today, as far as I know, Leningrad got the title as Hero City only in 1965. Mm-hmm. So this is rather late, wasn't it?
Yes and no, because this remembrance of World War II as a great patriotic war, how can I say, the whole culture of remembering World War II as a great patriotic war started in '65. So very briefly, so the victory was made. There was a huge parade in June '45 on the Red Square in Moscow. And in '46 there was huge remembering, 1 year after our victory. And then it was shut down. So for more or less 20 years, there were no public remembrance. And for one example, here in Berlin was built a huge monument in Treptow, which is a part of Berlin, Treptow Park. And this is the one and only symbol in the Soviet Union for 20 years, but it stays here in Berlin, the one and only symbol for the Soviet Union for 20 years. And after, from '65 onwards, they started, I would say, an own memory in the Soviet Union and starting giving such titles as Heroic City to Leningrad and then to Moscow and other cities. And for example, maybe you heard about in Stalingrad, Volgograd nowadays, there's another huge symbol, the mother, Mati Rodina, mother, what's it, Heimat?
Yeah, it's difficult to translate Heimat. Homeland? No, I don't know.
Homeland, mother, no, yeah. I don't know. Another huge symbol which was opened up in '67. So this is the moment 20 years later. That's why it came so late.
Okay. Yeah, please.
I'm Neil from Barcelona, Spain. I wanted to ask about, do you think there is a lack of representation in culture of the Leningrad blockade? So, at least from I would say, the Southern European perspective, it's definitely one of the most unknown events of the Second World War. What do you think about that? And also, how does it affect EU-Russia relations today? How does it feel for Russian citizens this possible lack of representation in culture?
It depends on where you're living. So in Russia, in the Soviet Union, everyone knows about Leningrad and the blockade of Leningrad. But more, in the Soviet times, more in topics of heroic defense. And you're right, in Germany, Western Europe, there were for a long time nearly nothing known about what went on there in Leningrad. It started in the 70s and going up to the 60s, 80s, 90s. And I already mentioned in the 90s in Germany, maybe in the West, but in Germany there was a huge discussion about the character of this war. And at the end we said, yeah, it's a war of annihilation. So it's not just a war, but there was a plan and ideological in terms of the Nazi propaganda, Nazi thinking. Can't say it correctly in English, and at that time, a focus was made on Leningrad, which is a very hard example or very good example. What does it mean, a war of annihilation? And then the discussion in the town as well. So St. Petersburg coming up as it's a modern, big town with touristic traffic and connections, business connections and so on. So this the proud city of St. Petersburg did it by itself. So look at us. And for us, it's very important. So coming to St. Petersburg as a tourist, you're forced to notice, oh, there was something in the World War too, and something about the blockade. So I would say nowadays coming to St. Petersburg, you get close to this historical topic. But yes, we are going on to talking about this blockade. In the German perspective, Stalingrad is the one and only, so you can say. But this is concerned with the German losses in Stalingrad. And this is already, which is not fair, but it is like this. This is the own losses. This is what you are remembering. And in Leningrad, these are the losses of the others.
But in terms of war crime, I mean, does this play any role with these new developments since the 80s? Leningrad is one of the biggest war crimes during World War II? Or?
Yeah, but in that time it was not, they didn't think that this is a war crime. To blockade a country in the Middle Age was normal. It was made in wars. Blockade it's legal. And what Caroline said, yeah, they wouldn't have accept a surrender. This is already illegal. And if you're looking at the planning of the Wehrmacht, where it said, yeah, we are not willing to occupy this huge town, and we know that the civilians who are not soldiers, that the civilians are hungry or starving, and this is a crime, a war crime. But the Wehrmacht generals for a long time were successful to say, this is not our fault. There was no possibility to get in. Strong defense of the Red Army, and this way it is helped. It was not able. Of course, it's a tragedy for the inhabitants, but it's not our fault.
But today, historians would not say that.
It's nonsense. So it's shown that it was the planning of the Wehrmacht not to go in, and. There's one argument, yes, the Wehrmacht didn't or couldn't make it in the middle, going to Moscow, so some troops and tanks and so on were taken away from Leningrad front to the Moscow front, but this was not the main reason. They didn't want, and Leningrad is an example for this. What does it mean? War of annihilation, and it's a crime.
And the second aspect of the questions, like the today relations EU, Russia, and Leningrad blockade, could you maybe comment on that? Does this play any role, or is this just too small to influence the narratives or this blockading history, maybe one can say
I
today?
could say a lot about that. It's like every time in the centuries when there are, in political sense, the relations becoming worse, you forget about the history. So in the 90s, when we started here our common museum, it was so easy to talk about Leningrad, to talk about whatever in this war from both sides. And there were open eyes and ears everywhere. And nowadays, they won't hear these stories, this history. And it's they are thinking in political terms, and the Russian Federation tries or behaves like a strong country in military sense, in economic sense, and so on. And so it is not comfortable to speak about losses, tragedy of St. Petersburg, the war, about the victory in this war, yes, but about the 3 hard years or 4 years before victory, no. But it's on both sides. It's not only the Russian Federation, it's the European, West Europe, it's the same, and yeah, it's a pity.
Mm-hmm. We have one more question here, and I would say let's collect, because we have like 5 minutes left, and let's collect all the questions that Dr. Morré can maybe answer them. We start with Bella.
Yes, I'm Bella from Berlin, Germany, and I'm interested because you just said that it was recognized as a war crime, the Leningrad blockade. So what in your opinion is the legacy of this event, and how is it impacting wars today?
Mm-hmm. Let's collect, please, because we have 2 more questions.
My name is Peter. I'm from Italy, and we kind of went into this area before, but I was curious how the security situation was in the city during the blockade. Surely there was a rising crime, but how was order maintained? How was stability? What was the administration in general like?
Mm-hmm.
I'm Kamil from Poland, and kind of similar question, but on the personal side of people there. So how much of civilian life was retained? Were schools going on? Because those were 900 days, so kind of how was it looking there?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. More questions? Because this is the last chance you have. No? Okay, so thank you. It's
very brief. Inside the town, I would say it was a kind of civil war, one against the other, and the survival of the fittest. Yeah, but there was crime, there was cannibalism, there was no solidarity, there was fighting by its own, dying by its own. The inhabitants or the senior Leningraders, so people living already for a long time in Leningrad, who had connections, who were involved in social networks, they had better chances. There were refugees in the town as well. People from surround the town were in town. They had less chances. So in one topic, yeah, civil war. And the administration of the town had little opportunities. They tried, of course, but the Soviet power, as it was said at that time, or the power of the administration of the town was not given. There was no chance. The legacy is, how can I say it? We have made a point in our permanent exhibition. Many books are written about that. There are films. What is very important is literature is written about Leningrad and the blockade, and we as a museum, German-Russian museum, we are in close contact. But that's why this is so good that Peace Line exists. You're willing to go to Russia and St. Petersburg. It is not possible at the moment. But this is the best way to do, coming together, telling all the stories, and it's already the third, the fourth, the fifth generation. It's far away, it's history. Keep in mind, for St. Petersburg, not. It's still alive. If you're one day in St. Petersburg, you will notice it's still alive in different shapes, in different manners. Yeah, that's it. And Frau Dörrenbecher showed already this journal Osteuropa, which was made 5 years ago. And in all the researchers, they did all the research. So this is made, but living memory, it's still alive, and it will go on. So maybe it's the one point that it lives only in the East. So it would be better that in Brussels as well they know about that, and this is maybe our for the museum as we are a task to make more exhibitions about the blockade, about all the stories which have to be told, and once again and once again and once every 5 years maybe, or not only in this anniversaries, just make it.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Morré, we could not go to St. Petersburg, but I think it was most interesting to be here, to have sort of narrative Russian and German perspectives and historical perspective. Thank you very much for the questions and for the discussion. I think this was really interesting. And as you said, I mean, usually you have to go there and also to talk to the people who are still alive, or their sons and daughters who still have the memory. If you want to know more, maybe we can even collect some book titles and tell you or put this in the chat that you, for those who are interested, you can read a little bit more. And then you now, the people who are here, have the possibility to go to the exhibition. For those who are on the screen or watching at the screen, maybe you could just come here. It's most interesting to talk to Dr. Morré, but also to see the museum and the exhibition. So this was a propaganda shot for me. And thank you very much for being here, the Peace Liners. Thank you very much, Dr. Morré. Thanks for listening, and hope to hear and see you soon in the framework of Peace Line. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.